In today's episode, VOIP versus the entire organization. Perhaps he is being too paranoid. Email sales. Is the router turned on? Why is that spare server blinking? Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. VOIP versus the entire organization. Hello folks. I posted a little while ago about an SSD that got abused and realized I had a couple of other good ones in me. Granted, this didn't happen while I was working tech support, but I maintained close relations with the organization's IT department after being an apprentice there for a few years. I was the office tech support whenever somebody wanted help anyway, and it was interesting to see this one from the user's perspective, because this was a doozy. Folks, let me tell you about Mitel. I'm going to keep this all as anonymous as possible, but the important information here is that it's about 2016 to 17, and that I work for a local authority. From my time in their IT department, I know that our network is a Frankenstein's monster of hardware installed 2 weeks ago and stuff put in shortly after the execution of an bulletin. Our offices vary from old enough to have historical value to buildings under construction. We have Windows 8.1 and 10 devices being trialed, rubbing shoulders with the XP machines that we're still finding hooked up in caves, and somebody important has rightly decided to kill the analog phone network in favor of VoIP. Naturally though, this is 2016 to 17, so MS Teams doesn't exist yet, but do you know what does? Skype for Business. Lots of people have used Skype, so going to Skype for Business would be a logical step. So the authority bought Mitel. I spend about a week or so helping the desktop engineers replace the old phones and hook up headsets to the new computers. I help people get Mitel set up, and for about 6 months or so, everything's fine. To its credit, Mitel's interface was hideous, but at least it was easy to understand and use, and that call quality was good. For 6 months, everything is hunky-dory. 6 months. Plenty of time for the transition to be completed. It all worked fine. Until one day, at about 1:30, it didn't. That day, the Mitel program wouldn't work for anybody. Main and satellite offices alike experienced this one program just stop working, in the space of about 5 minutes. IT investigated, but to no avail. But that's just one day. I've seen worse happen in one day. It should be fixed by tomorrow. Tomorrow rolls around, and it's fixed. Everything's fine. We go about our day, we do our work, we call offices and so on. It's all working fine. Until about 1:30 again. The same flurry of emails gets sent to IT, and they say they're working on it. The next day, everything is fine. Until the afternoon. The same thing next day. And the next. Every single day, without fail, Mitel would stop working across the whole organization. It's not like IT didn't try to fix it, either. From speaking to friends and colleagues in the department, they tried everything short of blood sacrifices to get Mitel to work, but to no avail. Not even the server team could fathom why Mitel kept breaking every afternoon. One day, I even saw a man from the company that made Mitel walking around, and I don't think I've seen somebody trying to hold it together as hard as that guy. That man was about as popular as a rattlesnake in a crowded, sweaty disco. This went on for over a year. In that time, the authority installed a whole different system for the customer service phone lines, probably managed to end the contract, and wasted an unknown amount of taxpayers' money on a system with one of the weirdest bugs I've ever seen. Eventually, we went with Skype for Business, and today, the infrastructure is better than it's ever been. If anything good came from it, it's that somebody finally learned that buying quality products is better value for money. Perhaps he is being too paranoid. We are a large, international firm. As such, we frequently remind our users to be ever vigilant toward malicious emails, running regular phishing tests, and forwarding training bulletins. Of course, our training includes ideas such as forwarding suspect emails as attachments, spoiler, they never do, to your favorite tech support person or to our central ticketing system. We also force required updates to our users via policy, but of course, some machines don't like the update, and we have to contact them to install an update manually. Not a big deal for most people, it gives them a quick break during the day. I had one user who took forever to respond to my request to install a driver update. He finally did. We decided on a time, and I sent him an invitation so that time would be blocked off. A few minutes later, a new ticket comes through the system from this user, with our email thread attached. I'd like to confirm this is a legit request. I replied with details of our appointment and a link to my intranet profile before closing the case. The update via remote access went off this morning without a hitch. Email sales. First job right out of college was to help one of those big blue and yellow stores get built in the northeast of the US. I was given the hourly wage title of super user and wasn't even allowed into the management meetings that happened once a week. Even though I was responsible for all tech and employee training at the organization. Found out later it was partly because when managers and assistant managers got bonuses they were a month or two extra of salary, and I got $100 in my check. Anyway, the entire sales floor was thin clients. Half the office PCs were thin clients. Each department on the sales floor had a username and password specifically for that area simply to force printer installs and make sure each department had the software they needed. All managers had a computer or thin client in the office to work, check email, etc. Well, because managers and assistant managers were so incredibly important they would log in during slow times on the thin clients on the sales floor. Read, print emails, the whole 9 yards. The problem was when they logged back into the thin client as the department login and tried to print, that default printer technically didn't exist. Now, for these big blue and yellow stores, people have to order mostly in the departments, especially big as kitchen and storage orders, and then take the sheets to a warehouse to get those boxes stacked up and ready for them. In some rare cases the network would get so nutty it would bring down all 35 plus POS systems at the front of the store. So pretty simple solution, right? Don't check personal email on the sales floor. Then we can, sell stuff. And take people's money. And get paid. Once a week. Once a week the entire store would shut down and everybody would yell at me even though it was completely and totally their fault. Naturally most of these outages happened during a peak Saturday or Sunday shift. Once I put in my 2 weeks after 7 or so months, and this happened I'd hide in the server room to let the fire spread a bit before having to restart everything. I may be an hourly wage employee, but maybe, just maybe, I know WTF I'm talking about here, folks. Is the router turned on? This happened last year. I do not work tech support, but I am A+ certified. As the tech guy in the family, I of course get the phone call to come help whenever my parents' Wi-Fi breaks. My sister is 22 and still lives at home. She calls me one day and says come help, the internet won't work. So I go down there. They have more issues than you might think, usually because someone screwed up the router. One time the Wi-Fi radio got turned off with a dedicated button on the housing. Thanks Tenda. Anyway, my first question on the phone was, is it plugged in? I was assured by my sister the answer was yes. So I drive down there. Go into the office to look, and what do you know, router's unplugged. The Wi-Fi hasn't worked for like 2 weeks at this point, but no one bothered to do much as make sure it was plugged in. Why is that spare server blinking? I work in industrial automation, and for some smaller customers this bleeds over into also providing light IT support when they don't have a dedicated IT team. A customer was planning on upgrading a few pieces of software on their automation servers and wanted me to be on site in case something went wrong. No problem. The upgrades go pretty well, the server needs a reboot, so I go to reboot it. It doesn't come back up, so I ask where their server room is. We walk down the hallway to a door, the customer opens the door, and I'm greeted by a bunch of filing cabinets and cardboard boxes sitting in a small closet-sized room. And then there in the back, around the stack of cardboard boxes, was a server rack with 2 or 3 servers humming away. I push back the desire to talk about maybe adding some access control or some HVAC to keep the tiny space cool, and push my way to the back of the closet. As the customer is pointing out which servers do what, I ask them which server is the one that we were working on. The customer points to the floor, and there's 2 spare servers sitting on the carpet directly on top of one another. But there are wires going to the servers. And the lights are blinking. Wait. They're in production this way? Servers just sitting on the floor. Turns out the top server was their SQL server, and the bottom one that was sitting on the carpet was the SCADA server that I was installing updates on. I don't know where they got these servers, but they wouldn't fit in their existing rack, so they just kind of set them down somewhere. I gave the bottom server some airflow by putting a cardboard box under it, rebooted it, continued about my upgrades, and finished the day by sending a strongly worded email about how rack-mounted servers should probably reside in a rack, and not directly on carpeted floors. I'll give you one guess where those servers are sitting today.